welcome back to another episode of The Drive-In. As always, I am your host, Aaron Lopez, and this week I'm joined by a friend of mine, Xander Hillenbrand. She is here, first-time host. We don't get many of the first-time hosts. We're 30-some episodes in. This is, I think, number 36. And so it's been a while since we've had a first-time host. So, Xander, thank you for coming on, first off.
Hi, thank you for asking me.
We both went and saw Christopher Robin this past week, so that is the topic of this week's episode. Kind of a different style of movie for this podcast. Not that we don't pretty much see anything. But Christopher Robin being, I think, outside of Coco, the first Disney movie we've done. Unless there's something that's completely just slipping my mind. But Christopher Robin, starring Ewan McGregor and Haley Atwell, directed by Mark Forster. Now, if you didn't know, I had to look it up because Mark Forster sounded really familiar to me. He directed World War Z. So I'm like, World War Z, Christopher Robin, clearly there's the connection. I didn't get it, but he directed a few other things. But he did Finding Neverland with Johnny Depp. So maybe there's the connection to. I don't know if that was Disney though.
No idea. Haven't seen it.
Not very good. Sorry, I remember seeing it when I was in it was between that and Racing Stripes, and we were like,
is that the one with the zebra?
Yeah, it's where the zebra becomes like a racehorse, and there's like the racist portrayal of the two flies that are like, I think it's like Bernie Mac and Cedric the Entertainer, and it's really bad.
I have only vague memories of that movie.
Talking animal movies are not bad, but that one was not very good. We're kind of talking about a talking animal movie here in some way. So, Xander, what is your connection? I always try to get, some sort of connection as to, okay, why is this person here talking about this movie? What is your, childhood connection, if anything, if you had any, to Winnie the Pooh?
In my family, we watched a lot of Winnie the Pooh as kids. Disney movies were kind of weird grab bag of things we were allowed and not allowed to watch. Mm-hmm. But Winnie the Pooh was always a safe bet, so lots of fond memories of that. I will say I was excited to see the trailers for Christopher Robin with the old style stuffed animals. Yeah, that was cool.
There's a level of creepiness to it, but
I can see that.
On a nostalgia aspect, it was kind of throwback.
Because it reminded me of the intros of the older episodes of Winnie the Pooh.
Absolutely.
Where it would pan around the child's bedroom, so I thought that was really cute.
That was really cool. Yeah, I remember my aunt was actually who got me onto Winnie the Pooh. She was a huge Pooh fan. And so I don't think I personally ever had any Winnie the Pooh movie or anything like that. But whenever I'd go to her house, she would have them all. So I'd watch the Heffalumps and Woozles one and I don't remember all the names of them, but I just remember she had a shelf of these movies. So I'd go over and watch those, and I never really got into it, but I did enjoy I always loved Tigger. She was a huge Tigger fan. But I think I always really related to Rabbit and Eeyore, which says so much about me, but yeah, we'll get into favorites and things like that as we go along. But let's get into the trailers. So the trailers for my viewing, we'll see if they were different from yours, but was The House with the Clock in the Walls, Goosebumps 2, Haunted Halloween, AXL, or Axel, however you want to pronounce that, Wonder Park, Smallfoot, Dumbo, and Mary Poppins Returns.
Had a couple of those. Didn't have... What was the second and third ones you listed?
Goosebumps 2 and AXL or Axel.
Didn't have either of those.
Okay. What did you have other ones that you remember off the top of your head?
Yeah, had Little Women. They're apparently making a new Little Women movie. I had
not known about that. Okay.
Right. And it was weird because it got to halfway through the trailer before I realized what it was about.
Wow.
Because it started out as showing this girl who obviously wanted to be a writer, but it's set in modern
that's bizarre.
day, I think.
I didn't even know they were redoing it.
Very close to modern day. And it was about halfway through the trailer before I realized, oh, this is Louise May Alcott. Cool.
No, that's awesome.
And then I think there was another one that you didn't list, but I don't remember what it was now.
The one I was going to ask you about, I think, I'm trying to remember which of the two. Well, the one out of all those, I mean, I'm really excited for Dumbo and Mary Poppins Returns, but I think anybody with a pulse and who has watched a Disney movie is excited for those.
Definitely Mary Poppins Returns, because it has
Lin-Manuel. I know, that's the exciting part. But I mean, I'm a huge Emily Blunt fan too, and she's But I mean, you gotta appreciate. I mean, not just having him as part of it. Like we had him with Moana. He'd sang a little bit, wrote some songs. But us theater fans, you get Lin-Manuel on a project, and we just go nuts. But The House with the Clock in Its Walls was one that I have been like trying to figure out what kind of movie it was for so long. Yeah. This was a different trailer than I had originally seen. It was a different one that gave me more to it. It's definitely a kids movie. Before I wasn't sure because there was like
struck me as like a horror movie.
Yeah, like horror light.
Yeah, light horror with a little fantasy, but yeah, I'm interested to see that one.
Well, because something that if you guys listen to the podcast before, you've definitely heard some of the kind of the confusion with this one. It really is. It screams kids movie, but at the same time, there are some elements that are really, really creepy. There's like a jack-o'-lantern plant that's very creepy. But the worst part about it is the walking, talking dolls. They're like the creepy Victorian dolls that are walking and talking, and there's nightmares that come out of that.
Like my mom bought me a bunch of dolls as a kid, and I've taken pictures of like my shelves, and people are like, "Why do you have so many creepy dolls?" But that part of the trailer is definitely creepy. Yeah, but
now we have a little bit more of the plot. The kid is trying to help. There's an evil villain warlock, and Jack Black is like teaching the little kid all the good things.
Jack Black.
And here's my thing: is Jack Black is making like a second career out of like children's based movies. Which, if you saw what he did in the beginning of his career, you would have never thought he was going to go anywhere near children. Some of the songs that he sang as part of Tenacious D, and
the only Jack Black movie I can specifically think of right now is I think
Nacho Libre. But yeah, what's the other one that he really? Recently he did Goosebumps. But like Shallow Hal, yeah, he's done it well. And then my personal favorite of his, High Fidelity, he wasn't the lead in that, but not a guy that you'd expect him to do children's movies. But it's funny because then after that they have Goosebumps 2, and he's not in that one because he played R.L. Stine in the first one, and I was like, oh okay, but they don't have R.L. Stine in this one. It feels like a straight to DVD movie that they're putting into theaters. I don't know. We'll see. But the other one that I don't know what it's going to be about. It looked interesting, but it was a Wonder Park. Did you have that one?
I don't think so, no.
I have no idea what it's about. The trailer was more about trying to make you see like big bright things. But essentially this kid finds a ride in the woods and like gets into it, and it takes it to this like park. And this park is like filled with all these animals that talk and creatures, and it's weird. It's animation. It's not like real, live action or anything like that.
None of it's live action?
None of it's live action.
I was going to say, what if it's like a Bridge to Terabithia?
Yeah, it wasn't like that at all.
Theme park. It
was more like in the style, somewhat it reminded me of like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Like that kind of animation.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So I don't know. It looked interesting. I probably won't see it, but I didn't know you're put into it. But yeah. Any others that you're looking forward to seeing that we didn't talk about?
I don't expect it to be like a masterpiece, but I'll probably watch Smallfoot just because it looks entertaining.
I will say the voice talent looks pretty good. Channing Tatum's the main person.
I didn't even pay attention to
There's a couple of people in there, and I was like, when they went through and they were talking about him, LeBron James is in it. I mean, he's gonna throw his hat into the acting ring at some point. If we're gonna get Space Jam 2, he's gotta do something at some point. Yeah, it looks fun. It doesn't look good, but it looks like if you're gonna watch it, you're gonna laugh and you have a good time.
Yeah.
Kind of like most of the kids' movies that come out nowadays. But this is gonna be a little different. We'll see. Let's go ahead and go into our spoiler-free summary. So the spoiler-free summary of Christopher Robin is as follows. A working-class family man, Christopher Robin, encounters his childhood friend Winnie the Pooh, who helps him rediscover the joys of life. Plenty more that we could talk about, but as always, that would be getting into some spoilers. So if you haven't yet seen the movie and you don't want any spoilers, the long and short of it is go see it, and when you get back, you can see all the details and the fun part and all the discussion that me and Xander are about to have. Here's your chance to go and take a little break, and we will see you guys on the other side. All right, so now everyone's had their chances to pause. We are now spoilers abounding. Not that Christopher Robin or Disney movies really kind of like scream spoiler alert, but now people either, as I always like to say, they have seen the movie and they want to know what we have to say about it, or they just like to hear us talk, which we do have those people. As always, one of those people, Andre, here's your shout out for the week. All right, so let's get into it. What did you think of Christopher Robin, Xander?
I mean, I think if you've seen the trailers, then the basic plot is pretty easy to guess. But as far as the execution, it was really cute, very charming, very heartwarming. There were a couple, although the premise is easy to guess, I think the, how they get there. There are a couple little twists that I enjoyed very much. Yeah, I remember
I went and saw it last Friday, and I'm sitting at lunch with Jordan, and I said, the plot's going to be that he's gotten a little too out of touch with his childhood, and then when he's going to help him. Or I said there's going to be some like heart-wrenching Toy Story 3 moment where he says goodbye to all of his friends, which I was kind of leaning toward that one, I thought, which kind of happened at the beginning. But yeah, I mean, don't go into this movie expecting some like crazy off-the-wall plot. Like, no, like, it's a template that has worked for many, many years. They're not going to mess with it. They're going to tweak it. Like you said, there's some twists and turns. But yeah, I think that the way that one of the first things I told somebody that my quick like off the cuff review was, it was cute, fun, very predictable. Yeah. But I wasn't mad that I saw it. I enjoyed myself. I laughed more than I thought I would. Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah, definitely. It was actually pretty funny. Very funny. Yeah. And I think it's because of my sense of humor. Because I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, I relate to a lot of these characters way more than I should. But yeah, I mean, right off the bat, we do get a little bit of a twist in the plot. I didn't really anticipate this being how the movie started, with it them throwing a going away party for Christopher Robin, which is really kind of a sad thing when you think about it. But he's going to boarding school. Yeah, which confused me at first for a second, because I'm like, how do they know this is his last time? But sending the kid away to boarding school, that was, a common thing. Yes. That makes sense. Yeah, and so we have all the characters. I thought it was a nice little way to introduce the characters. They all had their little moments as they were coming up to the table. One huge disappointment that I didn't see him in the trailers, but I'm like, oh, they're not gonna forget him, was Gopher. Gopher wasn't in this. He did like the stutter that he would always do, or the click. I was all excited to see Gopher, and they didn't have Gopher in this. So movie sucked. I hated it. It was awful. But no, I thought it was a good introduction. With that being said, though, what was your view on the live action aspect? Because I know a lot of people, Jordan being one of them, she would not go see this movie for this reason, is that the beady-eyed dolls creeped her out. I got over it very quickly, but what did you think of how they portrayed the live action aspect? So, the creepy, it never really struck me as creepy. Maybe the first time I saw the trailer, and first saw Winnie the Pooh, it kind of gave me a pause of wait, what? But, again, my memory of Winnie the Pooh as a child has, that introductory pan over the child's bedroom with all of the stuffed animals. That's something that's very sweetly nostalgic for me. Mm-hmm. So it really didn't bother me that much. I thought that they were very tastefully rendered, even looking at the stuffed animals in that intro, the classic view of them. Mm-hmm. They've touched it up. Tigger is a lot cuter in the movie than than the stuffed animal. Yeah, and Roo as well. Yeah, or Kanga. Kanga's was disturbing. If you look at that is that's a rag doll. Even Pooh looked pretty ragged, in the original intro, and I thought all of them were really cute. I get what you mean about disturbing some people. Well, I think it's the small eyes, because you look at it and you're like, if you look at Winnie the Pooh, he had just black eyes. There was nothing fancy about it, but I think it's this idea of, I don't know, a lot of people think of the doll aspect, that just some people are kind of turned off by that. I honestly, it didn't bother me. I saw it in the trailers. I was like, oh, this could be a little weird. But I think it was a good use of the CGI and all that. Mm-hmm. It didn't feel like it was bad CGI.
No.
So that was
they looked very soft and huggable.
Yeah, I mean, really, they did. One thing though, and I should have. This shouldn't have surprised me because this was how it was in the show and in the movies and everything like that, the books. But I didn't. For some reason, I thought rabbit and owl would have been stuffed animals too. I don't know why.
No, yeah, I thought that too.
They've always been the animals, but I was like, oh, when they came up to the table at the beginning, I'm like, oh, that's an actual rabbit.
And oddly enough, that I didn't notice that as much with rabbit, but I did notice it with owl.
Yeah.
And thought like, he looks more like an animal. Did he not actually have a stuffed owl, or is this
no, those two? And I look back on it, and I'm like, no, they were definitely animals, but I never put two and two together.
Now that you mention it, but yeah, I did notice there's at least a difference between owl and the others.
So now that we've kind of introduced the characters, let's go back before even the movie. Who is your favorite character?
Ooh.
One that you like more than another?
I mean, I always thought Rue was, the adorable toddler, basically. That's hard. Quite possibly Tigger, but I have a new appreciation of Eeyore,
I think everybody that has gone to college, has kind of started to live their life, is like, oh, Eeyore is the most real character in all of Disney.
And there was a specific point in the movie where I realized that, I think.
What's that?
Well, it's... So Christopher Robin, finds Eeyore after, midway through,
yeah.
he can't find anybody else. And Eeyore thinks he's a heffalump.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't recognize Miss Christopher Robin, which I thought was an interesting choice.
Yes.
And it made a lot of sense.
It absolutely did.
And then as Christopher Robin is pretending to fight the heffalumps and woozles to convince everyone who he really is, and Eeyore is sitting there, and he can see everything, and he sees he's not actually fighting on, he's playing
he's
pretend.
Like, guys, there's nothing here.
But then he says, oh, he's playing just like Christopher Robin.
And then there's the lights come on. Yeah.
And I think that was definitely one of my favorite moments in the movie, of Eeyore being the one who could see everything for what it was, but then went along with it.
Eeyore, well, and first off, congrats to them on getting Brad Garrett. He was perfect for this. I loved him as Eeyore. Some of the other ones, the other names that, you may not recognize the peoples, but if you see, Jim Cummings was not the original Winnie the Pooh, but if you've heard Winnie the Pooh's voice, you're probably thinking of him. He also voiced Tigger. Brad Garrett played Eeyore. Nick Mohammed did Piglet, and I hadn't seen anything with him. He's a British actor, so there's probably some connection there. Peter Capaldi.
Peter Capaldi as Rabbit.
Yeah. So if you're a Doctor Who fan, you got your Peter Capaldi there.
Really, who else would he play?
I know.
Based on what I've seen of him.
I did not know this until I just looked at it, but Toby Jones played Owl. Toby Jones, and I'm trying to remember the character's name. I should know this. He was just in Jurassic World. He played in
Jurassic World?
He was the industrialist who's selling them off.
Oh.
And he was also in Captain America. What character was he in that? He was Arnim Zola in Captain America and Winter Soldier. So if you've seen his face, you would recognize him. He's been in a lot of movies. He's usually kind of the smaller Weasley guy. He voiced Dobby, actually, too, in Chamber of Secrets and Deathly Hallows Part 1. So, yeah, I mean, he has not the guy that I would have thought of when I saw or heard Owl's voice. But so they got a lot of people. Only one of the original actors, at least from, or I say original, but he wasn't the original. None of them were the original because they've all passed. But yeah, so I thought that was a really good introduction of the characters. Then we kind of get into the Christopher Robin history, leading from when he leaves because he before he leaves that day, he has a goodbye moment with Winnie the Pooh, kind of I'm always going to be around. If you ever feel lonely, come to this spot. And it's this log overlooking a valley with a tree next to it. It's their spot. And so they have this moment, and then he goes, and we get a little bit more of his life. But they do it in this really cool book style, which I thought was really neat. How do you think that kind of set you up with the movie? Because they didn't really do it after that.
No.
But what do you think of that as a setup?
Well, again, I think it was a callback to the old movies, because that's how they would do it, and you could see even like the text on the side as you were zooming into a scene, and I really liked that format. And something else I noticed, and I don't know if this was like a specific stylistic choice or not, but even as they flipped through, they stopped naming the chapters. And in retrospect, I wonder if that was kind of a reflection of him leaving, the storybook format behind. As he grew up.
I was very, it wasn't a gruesome scene, but I was very surprised that they portrayed World War I or II, or I think it was World War II. I just was surprised because, it definitely was a battle. He was getting shot at. There were explosions. It wasn't like you didn't see body parts. Yeah, you didn't see anything like that.
Gory. It's still a kid's film, but yeah, it was a bit of an intense scene for that.
Yeah, you don't really you should, because of the timeline of everything, and always put World War II and Winnie the Pooh in the same conversation, but you don't think about that. So, but yeah, so he goes to boarding school. We got a little bit ahead of ourselves with the World War II, but he goes to boarding school, finds out that his father has passed, and then he has to grow up.
Yeah, there's this very specific line where someone tells him, "And you're the man of the house now."
And that sets the tone. You know exactly what's going to happen to the character.
Yeah.
As has happened with many characters and people in real life when something like that happens. At some point, he meets Evelyn, so he meets his future wife.
And it's adorable.
Oh, yeah. And, the guy who took the seat, so he gets he's sitting, Christopher Robin's sitting in the bus. He sees a woman who clearly could use a seat, so he gets up and offers a seat. And as soon as they turn around, a guy's slipped in and taken the seat. I'm like, you dick.
He did say thank you, but
still, it was rough. But yeah, so they meet, and then she becomes pregnant with their daughter Madeline, who, how long was he at war? Because I thought she had maybe another kid, because she is pregnant when he leaves for war, and the kid is at least maybe 3 or 4, maybe 5. I'd say maybe 6 or 7. It was an older kid.
Yeah, I assume he signed up, at the beginning of the war,
But the odds of surviving 6 or 7 years of World War II, good on you, Christopher.
And then it's even having never met him, she's all like, "When's Daddy coming home?"
A very, very good. Okay, let's just talk about this. Kids are assholes. I'm a teacher. They know that they're assholes. They're wonderful people. They're going to grow up to be adults who look back on their lives and say, "Wow, I was an asshole." I do it. Everybody does it. This was one of the more polite, calm kids who just wanted nothing more than to please her father, and I just thought, okay, all right. Mom did a good job of raising this kid.
Oh, yeah.
But he comes back, and war is over, and much of what is going on in London at this time is a lot of these people come back from war, and then they get into jobs, and they just kind of live out their lives in that single job. He's doing this at a luggage company, Winslow Luggage. He's an efficiency expert. And we kind of get our villain, if there is a villain in this, with the younger Winslow. The character's name is, I think it's Giles. Giles Winslow Jr. And he basically comes in and acts like he wants to get his hands dirty, and I thought that was just
trying to fit in with the working class or something.
Oh yeah, it was so tacky. I'm like, okay, this guy's doing a good job of making me hate him, because I'm just rolling my eyes at every line. And he goes in and basically tells Christopher, you have to scale back 20%. And they were doing things of trying to find ways to make their products cheaper, doing all these different things.
Nickel plating studs over brass.
Yeah, they were talking about things, and you didn't really understand why. But then when he brings them into his office, you're like, okay. And so you have to scale back 20%, and 20% is a lot. Essentially,
yeah. And basically over the weekend.
Yeah, and that's what he says. You are going to be working this weekend, as we're going to be putting in some extra time. And he's like, well, no, I've got to take my family on holiday this weekend, going on vacation to the cottage. And he's like, well, do you, what was the line? He said something about, do you want to be a sinker or a swimmer?
Yeah.
He's like, well, I want to be a swimmer. He's like, good. But, all right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, you're setting up your conflict, this internal conflict is Christopher, is work more important or is family more important?
Mm-hmm. Which I thought it was kind of a weird way to set it up. I almost felt, because he had a very legitimate, looking at it as like an adult now, it's like he had a very legitimate reason to have to work that weekend. Mm-hmm. It just really sucked.
Well, and you think about it, you look at through the entire movie, what he's trying to do, he's trying to save people's jobs.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's not like Christopher Robin is like an asshole workaholic.
It'd be different if he was playing the Giles role of like the guy just telling people what to do but still working.
Yeah, and so often you see like that trope of like the workaholic father who's also kind of an asshole and has to have a redemption arc, and that's actually not what you see here. You see here someone who is, yes, overworked, but has the best of intentions. Absolutely.
And I thought that was... I didn't think about that until you said that, but yeah, he's not... He's portrayed as kind of being the bad guy because he's making the work choice. You, as a kid, you're like, yeah, that dad is doing all these things. He's doing them for him, and I just want him to play with me. Well, that just can't always happen. But I think, that's one of those things that I guarantee you the split in audience would have been the kids feeling that Christopher Robin's kind of,
And even I was like, I'm looking at this as an adult now.
Hence why Eeyore is like, yes, I get you now. So he goes home and he tells his wife, Haley Atwell, who also played Agent Carter. So there's two Marvel references there. And they had a really good twosome there. Ewan McGregor and Haley Atwell, very strong actor and actress there, and I thought that was a good combination. And you believed that relationship for the positives and negatives.
Yeah,
that was pretty well done.
So cute fictional couple.
Yeah, I mean, good job Disney for shipping that one. So they decide that he comes home and he's like, "Hey, so I can't go this weekend," and she's upset. She's like, "Well, when are you?" And this is a good point, and I always find myself making this point of people always talk about, preparing, doing all this so then later in life you can have a positive, really rich life. She's like, you're missing your life now.
Yeah. And then like, where's the line of like, okay, you're preparing, but when are you preparing for?
Yeah. And it's this idea that you're trying to, and I get it, like you want to save up so you can buy a house, or you can save up for a nice nest egg or whatever it might be, but you're also missing a lot in order for that to happen.
And again, he's not like an asshole. I almost feel if she had broached this in this way at another time when he wasn't under the pressure to like save people's jobs and stuff, I feel like he might have actually listened.
Which makes you think, how many weekend trips has he skipped on? Because it was just a weekend trip. It was clearly not that far away, as we see later in the movie, where everybody's just going back and forth like it's nothing. So it was like, he wasn't skipping out on this huge...
has she just been biting her tongue all this time?
Yeah.
Or,
I don't know. And we don't get that answer. I don't know if it's necessarily important, but it gives us...
We do get the impression he's definitely skipped out before, because then she admits that she didn't even pack his bag.
That's true. He's like, I'm going to go and pack. Where's my bag? She's like, I didn't pack it. Which, that was a dig.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an old school dig for you there. But they go and they go without him. He goes, well, before that, we do get a little bit of the relationship with the daughter. He asks her, well, she's actually going through his old things and sees his
little
drawings. Yeah. And she says he was such a good drawer. I was like,
she is trying very hard to find a way to connect with her father that doesn't relate to homework.
Yeah, because he goes, at the end of the scene here, he is tucking her into bed, and she's like, will you read me a story? Will you read to me? He's like, oh, of course. And he goes and grabs this, like, history book of, like...
The Victorian era.
Yeah. And she had grabbed Treasure Island to be like, okay, and she's, puts it aside, and she's like, all right, I'm getting tired. Well, yeah, I'm getting tired listening to Victorian era history. But, so you get this idea that she wants to be close, she wants to connect, like you said, and it's just, he's not picking up on it at all.
Yeah.
So they go, family tensions are very high. Before we go on, because the next part is Pooh waking up the next morning and can't find everybody. Before there, though, we do have this, like, neighbor friend who we don't see often. We see him, like, twice. But is it 3 times?
I think, because he's there when Christopher first comes home from work. And then the next day, and then...
The park.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like... It seemed like it was going to be a big thing. And then he just goes away. But he was creepy. he was pushing. Like, he was one of those people that basically he wants to play cards with him. Gin Rummy.
Yep.
It's like, you want to play Gin Rummy because he hears that Christopher Robin is good at it, and basically is a neighbor who wants to hang out with it. He doesn't have a whole lot of friends, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to hang out, and he's like, oh yeah, you know, we'll definitely do that. And then he finds out that he's staying home and not going with his wife and kid to the cottage. So he's like, going stag this weekend. Yeah, we're going to play some Gin Rummy. And he's like, oh, all right. And goes into his flat. And then the last time we see him, he like just pops up on him. He's like just in the park with him.
Well, he'd been about to knock on his door.
Yeah, and
then Christopher Robin
that's how he gets into the park. That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. That was an interesting character. I wonder what the motivation behind that character was, or if they were gonna do more with him, or if it was just for that park scene.
It got him to the park. There's no reason why he would be in that park other than, but still, it feels like to make him be such a unique character with the Gin Rummy thing was like a big selling point, and it could have just been some, I don't know, a landlord that he didn't like. I don't know. But then you maybe bring in finances, and they clearly were doing okay.
Gin Rummy, and I think, I don't know.
Yeah, it was a weird setup. I don't know what they were trying to do with it, other than, like we said, it gets him to the park. So the next, like the movie then shifts back to 100 Acre Wood. Pooh wakes up and he starts doing his morning routine. We get some classic Pooh stuff here. Yeah. The honey, the short fat.
And he's out of honey, and he does his morning exercises, and
it's like
I was almost surprised he didn't rip open.
I know, like, so he talks about doing his morning exercises, and he's like, I gotta do my my morning exercises to get me in the mood to eat my honey. It's like there is some weird just phrasing of it, but it's just Pooh, and you're like, all right. And then he like falls down the stairs, and
it's Pooh.
It's Pooh.
It's Pooh. It's the cartoon Pooh from your childhood.
For me, there was a lot of that. Like, okay, there's a nostalgia factor in that first scene with him in his house, because it's just like everything. You know, him trying to get the honey. He's like, oh, who ate all the honey? And he just saying all the lines that you remember,
and then going to visit his friends.
Yeah.
To see if they have honey.
Exactly. The first one, he goes to his piglet, and he's like, I wonder if he's there. He looks in, he's, doing all the Winnie the Pooh stuff. Well, there's the secondary conflict here that he can't find any of his friends. He goes to everybody's house. He goes to Piglet's. After Piglet's, I don't remember who he goes to.
I think it's implied that he probably made the rounds.
Yeah. And he's saying he can't find anybody.
Yeah, and then he's just wandering around. He goes to the table that's still got all the party stuff on it, or maybe from another party. But the table where they had their farewell banquet.
Yeah, and he ends up at Christopher Robin's door. And we see that that's kind of like a portal, I guess. This is what kind of started to get weird for me, because at this point, we're starting to realize that it was real and it wasn't his imagination, which I was always under the impression that Christopher Robin had an overactive imagination. Yeah. Like we all did.
Maybe went to play in the park or something.
Yes, with his dolls. Yeah. And that was it. But apparently, I don't know if this is what they were intending to do, but it seems like they've retconned the idea that Winnie the Pooh is a real, like, and all of these other animals are real, living in a different world that there's this connection to. Which,
again, was something that, like, as a child, I don't think I would have questioned. Oh, yeah. And as an adult, I'm being like, wait, so there's, like, a pocket dimension? There's an alternate plane? Is this a Narnia situation?
Exactly.
Who created this? Is there, like, technology to be found here in this portal?
Well, and there's a lot to it, because when Pooh comes through the first time,
it's not through the old portal.
It's not. He comes to where Christopher Robin is. And so it's like, okay, so it's where he needs him to be, and it seems like Pooh doesn't question it.
Yeah, Pooh's just like, well, I guess it's because it's where I needed to be.
Yeah, and the door's not there anymore. I guess we don't need it. It's like, okay.
And Christopher Robin, again, the two audiences, Christopher Robin is reacting as all the adults are and going, wait, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. And Pooh is the children being like, well, that makes sense.
Well, and even when he sees him, he's like, wait, this can't be. And it almost seems like he thought it was his imagination, too. Oh, yeah. Because when he sees him, he's like, what are you doing here? You can't be here.
And he's like, Evelyn was right. It's stress. I must have cracked. Although I will say I was actually pleasantly surprised at how short that was. The fact that he kind of just got over it.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of it, at least a portion of it, was that guy coming and him having to, like, either own to the fact that there's a talking, walking, stuffed animal and that knows him clearly, so there's a connection, or hide it and try to escape from it. The whole that was one of my favorite scenes.
If I think he'd had just admitted that there was a talking stuffed animal, the guy wouldn't have left him alone, though.
Oh yeah,
he would have been like, "Oh, this is fascinating." He would have been all weirded out.
Yeah, he would. Yeah, he wouldn't have been at all. But he tells him it's a cat, and he's how he shoves poo into his coat.
Bitey cat,
and he's like, it's diseased. And then he like gets out and he meows. And, like, the funny part is, like, anytime he's trying to hide poo, he tells him, like, at one point he says, like, play nap time. That's one of the things they do. There's another where he's just like, people can't see you move. But, like, Pooh's always just like, hello. He just wants to be nice and friendly.
He's Pooh.
Yeah, and it's just like the hiding him is what I think a lot of the humor of this came from.
Yeah.
But the cat, and with the meow as he went
as he walks away, like, dude, you're clearly just trying to make an exit. I don't know why you're still
because he's out of the park, walking to his door,
like he's
and
not
then
even inside anymore.
Yeah, and see, I thought this was going to be like where you get the guy tries to figure out because he's acting weird. Nope, that's it. He's gone.
Appears again.
Yeah, probably went through the door, came back.
Oh, through the tree door?
Through the tree door, yeah.
Yes, ended up somewhere else entirely where he needed to be.
So we'll keep talking about this reality imagination thing because it comes up again later.
It's really weird.
But he decides he's going to take him back the next day because it's after he came home from work, so it's like later in the afternoon.
Well, and then Pooh falls asleep.
Yeah.
So it's like
But this is also where we see this concept of, the next morning, Pooh and his honey. Mm-hmm. And this was hilarious. Gives him a jar of honey, and he's eating it, or he puts it on a plate for him, not a jar.
I think that's when he first brings him back.
Yeah. Was that because it is.
Yeah, because the next morning is something else.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's before the next morning, and he's walking around. Pooh gets honey on his foot, and then his other foot. He's walking, and he's like, "Oh, your floor's really sticky." And he gets into the rug, and he literally can't move, and he's just like kind of shuffling himself to try to go forward. It's just the funniest thing seeing this like animated teddy bear, like kind of like shifting his body weight to try to shuffle forward.
Just blithely ignorant of like the actual problem.
Oh yeah,
but still totally adorable. And then the fact that Christopher picks him up and then doesn't clean off his feet.
No, I know. Again, we're looking at it through the adult filter of like, you're making more work. What are you doing? So he eats so much honey that he gets tuckered out, and he tucks him in bed, and
his daughter's bed, I think.
Yes, which there's got to be some symbolism there of like the childhood memory going with his daughter. I don't know if it wasn't very obvious. The thing that
struck me was like, you can tuck in your teddy bear, but not your daughter. Because earlier when he says goodnight to Madeline, she's like, actually, I'm tired. And he's like, oh, okay. And he just like puts the book down. I don't think he even like pulls the cover up around her.
He just walks out.
Goes out. He like he turns back in the doorway, turns out the light. He's like, okay, good night. Closes the door, and then he does pause and like look back and sees that she turns the light back on. But then like the way he tucks Pooh in, and my reaction was just like, why is this like supposed to show he's starting to soften already, or just
maybe that's a good point.
All his childhood memories are with Pooh. Like he doesn't have any childhood-esque memories with his daughter because he's never treated her like as a child.
And that's true because and another element that we hadn't talked about is that he's getting her ready to send her off to boarding school as well. He's trying to prepare her for the best life possible, and he thinks that the best education at this boarding school is the way to do it. But she doesn't want to go. She's kind of subtly hinted here. She's talked to her mom about it. She doesn't want to go. She wants to spend time more with her family. It's not that she doesn't want to go to boarding school. She's just more interested in having the family connection rather than the like hoity-toity or the private school situation.
And Evelyn points out, like, there are plenty of good schools in the area.
Exactly.
Boarding school isn't necessary, it's just what Christopher Robin has convinced himself is the best thing.
Yeah. And so this, the next morning, the Pooh is looking for, honey, and what was...
clunking.
Was it?
I think the clunking is what wakes Christopher.
Yes. And so Pooh's down in the kitchen looking for honey. And I don't remember what happens before the rolling.
He breaks one of the shelves.
Okay.
And he looks at Christopher and he's like, "Your ladder broke." And Christopher's like, "Well, that's because it's not a ladder. It's a shelf." And he's like, "Well, that explains why it broke."
Yeah.
And then here's the funny thing. You see up above them, like on the one shelf that Pooh didn't break, this can slowly rolling, and there's a couple shots of it like back to it as they talk, and I thought for sure that thing was gonna hit Robin.
I thought it was gonna hit him in the head. Yeah,
I thought it was gonna roll off the shelf straight on his head and knock him out.
Yeah, that's what I thought was gonna happen completely. No, it just continues going, hits the other shelf, and then the entire kitchen like shelving on that wall just drops. I did see it was that scene. Still frame of it. I think it was yesterday or today. But it said, "There's nothing to do now, Christopher. I have the high ground." And I was like, that is the best, because your Star Wars, Ewan McGregor line and everything, and it was like Pooh standing on the counter. It's like, oh, that was awesome. But yeah, so he basically is like, all right, I got to take you back to the Sussex. If this door's not open, we're going to go to the Sussex cottage where I grew up. Mm-hmm. We're going to go to the door that's in the woods there. That's got to still be. That's where I went. So he decides to take him. He's going to get on the train, and he gets him to. They're walking. He's holding him, carrying him through the terminal.
Yeah, and Pooh's saying hello, hello.
Yeah,
like to take him into a phone booth.
Yeah, the phone booth
with people walking by and like, looking.
He's scolding the bear, and you can see like through the windows like this, like, hey, you got to stop. And he's like, you gotta play. This is where he talks about nap time. He's like, gotta play nap time. He's like, oh, like this, and then he just like slumps to the side.
Which, okay, that part was a little creepy because
like his
eyes are still open.
Yeah,
because he just looks like a stuffed animal, but he's not, and it's like, okay, this almost doesn't look like he's sleeping. It looks like he's dead.
Yep,
and I'm disturbed.
It was weird.
Just a few seconds like that. The stuffed animals in general didn't bother me. The eyes in general didn't bother me. That one bit was a little weird.
I loved it. And then
it's so cute too, because and that's like what you do with like a little kid. Like, let's play pretend, and you use the pretend scenario to get them to cooperate.
Well, they get into the train station, and there's a guy selling balloons, and he's like, "I want a balloon." He's like, "You don't need a balloon." He's like, "Well, I would like one. It would make me happy." Mm-hmm. And he's just kind of like, that's that like him softening a little bit, because he would never do that before. He goes and gets the balloon for him, and he just, and then you see him carrying it around. He's like tied it to his wrist, and he sets him down to get a ticket, and then he looks around and he can't find him, and the guy's like, "Your balloon went that way." So he goes and tries to find him, and he eventually catches up with him. A kid has taken him, which I thought was really funny, because he scolds the kid for stealing his bear. Like, you can't just take things that don't belong to you. And
no, you can't just take a teddy bear from a grown man.
Yeah. And then he's like, the mom's like, "Oh, would you do that?" And because he said something, and Pooh's talking to the kid, and just like as he's in the stroller, and he doesn't seem to care at all.
Because he's a kid.
He's a kid. Yeah, none of the kids. Well, I can say none of the kids. But that's also a discussion for later with some analysis. But yeah, so he gets onto the train, which I thought this was kind of funny, is that his balloon gets stuck in the door. And he's like, my balloon, he's like, you don't need it anymore, it's gone. And they continue to go, and they sit down in one of the cabins. And I think this is my favorite part of the movie, is when they're sitting in there, Christopher Robin's doing work, and Pooh is trying to entertain himself because he's bored. Just he's like a child. He's like, entertain yourself, play a game. He's like, okay. And he starts naming things that are going by. He's like, cow, tree, cloud. Like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm playing a game. It's called Say Things That You See. He's like, well, can you say it quieter? Or say it a little softer? tree, cloud.
Very
just,
stage whisper.
And it's just like, and he looks up at him, and it's just one of those moments. And then somebody comes in, he's like, oh no, this one's full. And you can see Pooh's playing nap time again. He like slumps again. Like,
and
it's like the
lady
Andy's
who walks
coming.
in just looks like from the bear to the man.
She's very weirded out.
Leaves.
She awkwardly backs out. But then they get to the cottage, and he gets dropped off by like a cab. And
Well, and as they're leaving the train,
they find the balloon again. And that's kind of important because a balloon is a very large symbol. It's not important, but it's very symbolic in this movie.
And Christopher does go back, and he's like, and I think Pooh notices the balloon. He's like, oh, my balloon. And Christopher's like, oh, okay. And goes back and gets it for him.
No question.
You can see him, like, starting to warm up to, like, this is Pooh. This is how you play with Pooh.
Yes. And that's kind of one of those things, is he's got a weird character arc in this movie.
He does, because it kind of goes back and forth a little bit.
Yeah, once he gets, so we're almost to that point. So he goes into the cottage, and they see Evelyn, and they see the daughter, Madeline, and Pooh's very curious. He's trying to find out some things about them. And,
what's that?
What's that? And who is that? No, she looks very nice, and talking about the daughter. She's working. Doesn't she like to play? Well, yeah, she likes to play, but she also likes to work. And Pooh says that he should give the balloon to her. Maybe she would like it. And they go to the tree, and he tells Pooh, like, all right, it's been great to see you, but go home. And he starts to walk into the tree. And he stops and pauses. And I don't remember why, but Christopher Robin turns around and he's like, what's the matter? And is that when he gives him the balloon?
No, I think it's...
I'm trying to remember, because he stopped.
No,
Pooh stops and doesn't walk all the way in.
Yeah, because he's like, well, aren't you coming with me? You're Christopher Robin.
That's right.
You need to help me find my friends. Because Christopher Robin, when you're playing as a kid, you're always the hero. You come in to save the day, so all the animals, if there's a big problem, who are you going to call?
And they even make that reference early at the party in the opening scene where they talk about they have a problem. I don't remember what it was, but they were like, well, when Christopher Robin gets here, he'll be able to help us. And it's nothing big. It's like...
a decision of like the poem, or if the poem was good or something.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And and that's right. So he's like, all right, you have to help me. He's like, I can't. He's like, all right. Well, he starts to go, and then he's like, all right, fine. It's like that big jump into... okay, now he's going to accept the fact that he has some sort of childhood connection that he has to fulfill. This
isn't just a fever dream that you're following to a tree to get rid of. This is, you're jumping in the rabbit hole or tree hole.
I was going to say that it is very rabbit hole-esque.
And he gets stuck.
And he's like, is this what this feels like? I love that. That was great. So he goes in 100 Acre Wood, and immediately something I noticed, and I'm glad it was part of the plot, but it's very dreary. Foggy and dark, and kind of like these darker tones.
And there was, again, another very specific line later that I think explains that.
Yes. But yeah, it's and they're okay, he's like, all right, so where are we going? He's like, we have to go find the friends. They weren't there. And he can't see because this fog is everywhere. They have no idea where they're going. So he takes out a compass out of his bag.
Well, he even says at one point, does anything look familiar? The fog.
Do you recognize anything? Does anything look familiar? Yeah. And so, yeah, he gets this compass. And he wants... You got the very curious Pooh. He wants to know... He's like, what is that? It's like, it's a compass. What does it do? Well, it helps us tell where north is. And so he gives it to Pooh, and he's like, follow the N. N stands for north. He's like, oh, that makes sense. And after a little bit, he realizes that they've been following their own footsteps. They've gone in a circle. And
it important also, when he hands him the compass, it's because there's a sign for, like, heffalumps and woozles, and Pooh's getting scared.
That's true. Because that is kind of what really sets off this major fight.
Yeah.
Pooh is very upset. He's very nervous and scared. And then that makes Christopher Robin a little bit more on edge. Then the fact that he's wasted all this time because they pretty much gone in a circle.
Because Pooh wasn't following the needle.
No, he was following the steps.
Yeah,
because he thought that he was following someone.
And he's like, well, the needle took us towards the heffalumps and woozles.
Yes, that's right. And that's where Christopher Robin kind of goes off the edge, and he yells at him. He just basically says that, there are no such things as heffalumps and woozles. I've grown up, and there's this discussion that actually I almost forgot about. There's a line that's kind of the most heartbreaking line of the whole movie.
Oh my goodness.
He's like, why are these why are the papers so important? Because he talks about the papers.
He's got his case of very important things.
Yes.
His briefcase.
And he's like, so why are they so important? He's like, well, because I have to, what was it? These people at work depend on me. He's like, are they your friends? He's like, they're more acquaintances. I don't like to get too close because if I have to let one of them go. And he goes, did you let me go? And you're like, oh my God, the feels. Because you're like, this idea of you don't want to be too close to somebody in case you have to say goodbye. And he said goodbye. He let him go. And it's like, oh man. That was
like
rough.
He doesn't want to say that, but he did.
And he even said, I guess I did. Like, he says, in a way, yeah, I did. And then Pooh's like, okay. Like, it doesn't really hurt his feelings. He doesn't quite understand it, but it hurts all of our feelings.
Yeah. And I think it does hurt Pooh. He's just... I mean, he's also not going to question Christopher Robin. Yeah.
Yeah, unquestioned leader.
And he's asked him, like, there's an interesting thing about importance of things, and he asks... He's trying to figure out how important the briefcase is, and he's like, is it more important than a balloon? And he's like, yes, of course it's more important than a balloon, and I think that segues into, how important the work is.
Yeah, and I think he even says, is it more important than your daughter?
No, I think that's later.
Is that later? Okay.
I think that's later.
When you said that, I was like thinking that might have been. Yeah. But so when he yells at Pooh at this point, Pooh ghosts. I don't know how he gets away that fast. But he turns around and Pooh's gone. Nowhere to be found. And that's when it starts to get a little foggier. It's like...
Foggier, and there's noises.
Yes. And the noises, you start to hear like almost like elephant stamps.
It's almost the cross between like the creaky door opening and closing and an elephant stomping and trumpeting. And it was
kind of creepy.
I was impressed. I liked it.
There were a couple moments in this that I was like, there were very young children sitting in the theater, and I'm like, if I was this kid, overall, the movie wasn't scary. Yeah. But there were moments where I was like, this would have made me uncomfortable intense. As a child. Yeah. And so this part, and he's telling himself there's no such thing, and he's like running away.
Yeah, but he's still running.
He is running from something he's saying he doesn't exist, and he just yelled at Winnie the Pooh for believing in. And he falls into this pit. It's a heffalump trap. That
was briefly shown earlier, in his childhood. They dug this pit to trap heffalumps and woozles.
And he looks up and he sees Gotcha, and he realizes where he is. And
he starts yelling. He's like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not a heffalump. Yeah.
And he does it in his Ewan McGregor angry voice too.
And there's also a point earlier where I think when he's explaining to Pooh why it's important, he mentions the name of the luggage company, Winslow, and Pooh mishears it, of course, as Woozle. But then Christopher just runs with it. He's like, yes, the Woozle will eat me if I don't get this done.
Yes, and that's important because that ties into a plot point a little later. This is one of those weird fever dream scenes then that he knocks himself out because he's trying to climb out of this, and
then there's a bit of a cave-in.
Yeah, and it's like some of the dirt or rocks kind of fall, and it hits him, and he falls on the ground. And then there's this dream sequence where he's underwater. It starts to rain in real life. And he starts to, quote unquote, real life. We're still not sure. In the 100 Acre Wood, the actual, quote unquote, actual 100 Acre Wood, it's raining. And so he is kind of knocked out, and he has this dream. He's underwater, and he sees Pooh underwater, who is talking normal. And then he's like, he looks behind him, and you see this really cool rendering of a bubble formation of an elephant. It's really cool.
At some point it looks more like an elephant, and then it's more bubbles. It was I really liked that part. It was really well done, and also reminiscent of the kind of trippy dreams from the old cartoons.
If you remember the Heffalump and Woozle song, it is disturbing and very trippy. Like with like the it's like an acid trip.
This was trippy in a different way.
Yes.
There's not like the bright colors. It's definitely a dark moment for Christopher Robin as an adult. Like it's a dark moment for an adult. But it does have kind of that trippy feel. Yeah,
with him being underwater and being able to breathe, Pooh talking underwater, this elephant, it's what I think this movie's version of that trippy, bizarre moment would have been. And then he wakes up and he's at the top of this pit, he's floating. And I'm like, first off,
the physics on that.
Yes, I'm like, physics. He should be dead. Like he would have drowned.
What's more, he is still holding his he is once again holding his briefcase, which is floating with him.
Which is in the water, but none of the documents have been damaged. It's just, I don't know.
It's the 100 Acre Wood.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is it's real, so the laws of physics apparently have to adhere there now, I guess. I don't know.
Only some of the laws.
But he gets out and he finds Eeyore. This is when he's like walking and he's trying to like find his whereabouts, and he gets onto that bridge that we see at the beginning of the movie where him and Pooh are talking. Which again,
very much it's from the movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean
the bridge where they race sticks.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of cool because he drops the stick on one end and then goes to the other side to watch his stick, and it's Eeyore. And you're like, oh, cool. You're excited to see somebody else. Because it has been probably a third of the movie, other than that opening sequence, that we've just had Pooh.
Yeah. Like, at least a third.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, at least that. And so Eeyore, and this is what you had referenced to earlier when he finds him on the bridge, and Eeyore thinks that he is being kidnapped by a heffalump. Because he goes in, and this is kind of a cool moment too, because he sees Eeyore floating toward what looks to be like this waterfall, this like rapids. He's like, "Oh, I'll save you," and he like jumps in. He like takes his shoes off like he's going to, and it's like in like 6 inches of water, maybe like a foot. And he's like, "Oh, that's right, I'm bigger."
It's like halfway up to his knees.
Yeah, like I'm taller now. Like that's right. And he picks him up and gets out.
And it's funny throughout this scene because he's actually starting to embrace no, I'm Christopher Robin, I'm here to help.
Yes.
Like, he's had this awakening, but he's not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of, it was a very strong choice for them to put Eeyore as the first character that he meets.
I loved that.
Because Eeyore's the one who is the most I always thought he was depressed. He's just very in touch with the reality of things. Like, not everything is as fantastic and whimsical as Pooh and Tigger and everybody else try to make it.
Yeah.
Normal days can be just blah. But they're like, Eeyore kind of like, I think his big concept is that even the blah days can be good days.
Just because they're blah doesn't mean they're bad.
Yes. And I think that's the misconception is I don't think Eeyore is, when I was a kid, I thought he was depressed. I think he is kind of less inclined to try to make everything be so exuberantly positive. Yeah. I don't think he's negative. I just think
he accepts it.
He's real. But he was hilarious throughout this whole movie. I thought he did a really, really great job. So this then leads us to running into, before that, actually, it's Eeyore. They start hearing this noise, and they're like, well, what is that? And they think it's
a bit of a creaking noise.
Yeah, it seems almost like maybe a trumpet, like the squeak of the trumpet, because it's coming off in the distance. As you get closer and closer, you see that it's Wednesday, which I forgot about them doing that. It's Wednesday, but it's windy, so that day it's a very windy day. And Owl's treehouse falls over, apparently. Had fallen over.
And Christopher Robin notes, oh, Owl's house fell down again.
Yes. And you're like, okay, there you go.
He's played this adventure multiple times.
Continuity, if you have seen the other ones. And he finds that this noise is just the weather vane. It's just creaking. Goes and gets the weather vane. He's like, oh, it was just this. And
Eeyore's like, oh, great. Now he's got a weapon.
That was hilarious. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, he picks it up
because he's still like, oh, the hefflump's kidnapping me. At least he's polite.
That was awesome. I forgot about the weapon line because he picks it up and that's right. He's like, oh, great.
Which isn't
now
something
he's got a weapon.
Which isn't something you necessarily expect from, like, the cartoons, them to talk about being armed, but it's so in character for Eeyore and so funny.
I think it was the timing of it, too.
Yeah.
But this then leads them to running into Piglet. Piglet is running away again from Christopher Robin because he, too, thinks that it is the Heffalump. Mm-hmm. And he runs and runs. And there was the line, I don't remember what he said, but Piglet's running away from him, and he is, like, running as fast as he can, and he looks back, and Christopher Robin's right behind him, and something about his legs, or, like, he's got long legs, I think it was.
He's got longer legs, my legs are so short, or something like that. It's Piglet, and I have to say, it is possibly the most adorable Piglet I've ever seen.
It's definitely playing up the cute factor of this character.
The cute scared, but, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's running, and he's got this armful of acorns because he loves acorns. And Christopher Robin at one point tries to give him an acorn because they follow this trail to him. And he's like, would a Heffalump offer you an acorn? And Piglet's like, if it's trying to trick me. But he takes the acorn, and then he runs.
Yeah.
And he's like, the acorns are weighing me down, but I can't drop them.
Yeah, and I forgot that Piglet was into the acorns.
Me too. I did not remember.
But then, like, when they said that, I was like, okay, I think I remember. Like, he always had, like, a satchel of them or something with him. But he runs into this like hollowed out, fallen over tree, this log, and all the other friends are there, and they're like, "No, you let him right to us." And Christopher Robin ducks down. He's like, "Hey, everybody, it's me. Like, how's it going?" And they all scream, and I thought that was hilarious. Mm-hmm. Because they all think he's a Heffalump. So this is kind of where we get to this shift, and
it's a beautiful shift.
It was very well done, and the realization of Eeyore, that was the cool part. So he's like, all right,
fine.
I
shouldn't have mentioned that earlier.
No, we were in spoiler zone. Your spoilers were abounding at that point. Yeah, so it's pretty cool that he starts to play in order to try to convince them.
Because they're like, well, you can't be Christopher Robin. Christopher Robin would save us from the Heffalumps. And he's like, fine, I'll prove it.
I will save you from the Heffalumps. And so he starts, like, beating up and it's actually, I think he's using his briefcase as, like, a weapon, or he's like swinging on the ground.
He's actually like beating up on the briefcase, maybe like with the or that's the death knell. Yes,
he takes the weather vane and like as this like kind of like jab to the heart, you know.
And it's funny because Owl is looking out a knothole in the log, mm-hmm. but he can't see over the grass. And Rabbit has his ear stuck up through a hole, so they're hearing all this yelling and this fighting, and Eeyore's quote unquote, describing it to them. He's like, oh, after he gets the point of, oh, he's playing. Yes. This is Christopher Robin. He's like, oh, there's a whole herd of Heffalumps. Yeah, and that scene and so they're all like, oh, who's winning? Oh, I can just see so much flailing.
Yeah, you're like he must be so brave, and yeah, you just see him. It's cool because they show you the vision of what Owl's seeing, and then you kind of see Eeyore's. That's what I loved. So when Eeyore makes that connection, there's like this like raised eyes, like oh, and so he's like, and then he starts to play into it. So then he comes back, Christopher Robin does, and he has saved them. Mm-hmm. So now they're all on board, and there's the question though of where's Pooh? Mm-hmm. They're like, is Pooh with you? And he's like, no, but I think I know where he might be. Which leads them back to that log that they had first said goodbye at the beginning of the movie. And that's where he's at. And he talks to him, and they kind of have this close moment of, like, this idea that he apologizes, essentially. Mm-hmm. He's like, you're not the dumb bear, you're Pooh. He kind of is just like, he accepts it.
There's a quote earlier of him being a bear with very little brain.
Yes.
Which is something, you're used to thinking about Pooh. But then Christopher Robin says it angrily.
Yes, and that's kind of what sends him away.
Yeah, he corrects himself here. He's like, you're not a bear of very little brain. You're a bear of very big heart.
Yes.
And it's like, aww.
And then they all have like this like happy time, and then they all fall asleep.
And I think that may be where the comment about Madeline comes in. Somebody asks about the case of very important things.
Yeah, it had to have been there because the next time we see it, it's been swapped. A lot of the items have been swapped. So yeah, they have this it's not necessarily like another party, but everybody's there, everybody's happy.
Yeah,
they're all
it's a
playing.
reunion.
Yeah. And but then the next thing we see is it's the next morning, or at least it's been some time, and Christopher wakes up and he's like, "Oh no, I've fallen asleep. Like I gotta go. I gotta get to my presentation." And they give him his briefcase. He's like, "Don't forget this. It's important." And he runs, and he's like, "It's wonderful to see you all." He's not leaving angrily, but he's rushed.
Yeah.
He has to get back.
Mm-hmm.
He goes back through the door, and
at some point, he finds the balloon again.
Yeah, it's like Pooh.
I don't remember where.
He might have had it with him, and he's like, "Here, take this to Madeline.
Maybe
she'll
so,
like it."
yeah.
Because like I remember him giving it to him, to Christopher for Madeline. So he takes it with him and he ties it to a chair when he gets back to the cottage, and then like tries to book it out of there. But then Madeline opens the door or windows and sees him, and he like tries to get out of the way, but she's seen him. Then Evelyn comes out, and so then this is like one of those weird moments that like they're like, "Did you just come out of the woods?" He's like, "Yeah." She's like, Evelyn's like, "Do you want to explain?" He's like, "Yeah," but he doesn't. He's like, "You wouldn't believe me."
And
it takes too much time.
And I think at this point, the audience is still like, what's real and what's not?
I think I'm still asking myself that question. But yeah, and he just leaves. And she's like, what's important to you clearly will find its way. Mm-hmm. And then you see him on the train, and you're like...
And Evelyn's like, I think we're going to stay here a few more days.
Yeah. That's where you start to feel like, ooh, this isn't just an upset family. Like, this is the seeds of a family breaking apart. Yeah. And you're starting to feel for him. So yeah, he gets onto the train and he heads back. And so that's kind of like 2/3 of the movie. And then we shift to like another adventure, I guess.
Well, on the train though, he starts playing a game.
Oh yeah. That was great.
Which I just thought was cute.
Yeah. And there was somebody in the car with him, wasn't there?
Yeah, a very uptight, official looking businessman.
Yeah, and he's like trying it out. He's like, car, cow, tree. Oh, that was funny. Mm-hmm. All right, so this is a good time for us to take a quick little break. We don't have a whole lot more movie, but we do have to finish up. But let's go ahead and use this time to go back to the lobby, refill your snacks, your drinks, your popcorn, all of that fun stuff, and we will see what is coming up soon from Eventide.
Oprah's Book of the Month Club? Please. We've got something much better in store for you.
Let's talk about books. The energy is right. I got a candle going. It feels good.
Every Monday morning, Jessica Gillen sits down and talks with you about the very best in books and literature.
Murder on the Orient Express, The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, The Cruel Prince.
It's The Bookseller, every Monday morning, brought to you by Eventide Entertainment. If there's one thing that's true about wrestling fans, it's how much they like to talk about wrestling. Join Aaron Lopez and Ben Norsworthy for the Top Rope Wrestling Podcast.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Tune in every episode and be ringside as these two break down all of the big matches in the world of professional wrestling. Brought to you by Eventide Entertainment.
Alright guys, welcome back to the second half of the drive-in. We just got done talking about Christopher Robin kind of leaving the 100 Acre Wood and trying to get back to London in time to do his presentation. He's on the train, and this is when we go back to the 100 Acre Wood, and we see Eeyore wearing what seems to be like a leather saddle, kind of. It's kind of what it looked like. And Pooh is kind of asking, so what is all this? Like, he kind of realizes, isn't that Christopher Robin stuff?
Important to note that Tigger is also there.
Yes. And Tigger's like, yeah, I took all of this stuff out to make room for the important stuff. The stuff, like, otherwise, how would he remember us? And this is where Pooh recalls this conversation that he had with Christopher Robin that said that if he if anything happens to these papers, he will be eaten for breakfast by the Woozle. So then they're like, okay, we have to get these, otherwise he's going to be eaten. We have to get them back to him. So they are all, Tigger, Eeyore, Piglet, and Pooh are all going to go on this adventure to return his items.
Mm-hmm. Which again, is one of the favorite, like, tiny moments in the movie, is when Piglet, in true Piglet fashion, is like, oh, you know what, maybe I won't go. I don't think I'll go on this. I'm kind of scared to go. And Pooh just very calmly offers Piglet his paw, and he's like, we need you. Mm-hmm. And Piglet's like, instantly calms it, and he's like, oh, well, I guess if you need me.
Yeah. And see, that's cool.
Yeah, and Pooh says, we always need you, Piglet.
Yes. And I mean, I've seen so many different reviews for this, and the one thing that is kind of consistent is, like, if there is such a thing as a Poohism, this movie's filled with them. Mm-hmm. Like, if there's these moments where you're just like, those are those things that you need to hear in order to feel good, or just to kind of know that things are okay, or things are life is not as bad as it may seem at times. And that's kind of, I think, that kind of underlying message of what the story of Winnie the Pooh is.
Yeah.
One of the weird things, though, is when they go through the door this time, they go back into the cottage, the Sussex cottage. So they're apparently, it only works to send them where they need to go half the time. Because I was wondering why it didn't put them into the other one.
For one thing, that will put them in London, and they don't know where anything is in London, and they don't have anyone to help them.
It's true.
And it could be argued that, you know, someone else needed them.
That's true. I know. But I'm just like,
no, I
they
get
do
your,
they
I get
do
your
need
point.
to be.
I get
with
your
her.
point, but I think there's still a logic to it.
Because they do. They come out, and as they are going.
Also a proximity thing, because he's not near any trees at that point.
At that point, he's on the train. He's near many trees, but only for a half second as he spots them on the train.
The technology can't get a lock on his position.
Exactly. It's the GPS isn't quite working at this point in history. Yeah. So Madeline is sent out to play by her mom, and she goes out to play tennis on their tennis court, which
she's not quite sure how to play.
Yeah, she's pretending, really,
and she finds the balloon.
Mm-hmm. Because that was tied to the chair as she goes, and she's like, oh, and that's where she starts playing with it. She's got a racket, and she's playing, trying to keep the balloon up, and she hits it, and she starts doing what we all did at some point or another, and like in one fashion or another, she's winning Wimbledon. And she's like, oh, and the crowd goes wild, and then they all start cheering, all the animals from the woods.
Yeah, they're like over a little ridge.
And she's like, who is that? Who's there? And they're like, congratulations. That's, on winning. That's amazing. And then they all fall out one by one of the woods. And she screams. Like, she has a real reaction. Yeah. So I was like, okay, good.
Because this is a child that's been raised with practicality.
Yes.
Not fantasy.
Yeah, imagination is not really largely part of Madeline's play vocabulary. She doesn't really do that. And so I think that was kind of cool, the fact that really for the first time in the entire movie, we see her start to play, and that's when the animals show up. And that's kind of that big connection there. So they explain, hey, your dad's, Christopher Robin, your dad has these papers that he needs, and she starts to put two and two together, and a part of her feels like if she gets these papers to her father, then maybe he won't send her away. Like, he will be happy and very proud of her, and that'll be
enough.
Yeah, it'll keep her at home. So she writes a... See, we told you. If you heard that, it was subtle, but we told you, those theater people and Lin-Manuel. But she writes this letter, and what's the word?
Expedition.
Yeah, she's like, we're going on an expedition. An expedition. And so she knows exactly, like, she's like, oh no, like, the mom is like freaking out.
How old would you say Madeline is? Like 7?
At this point, no, I think
8.
I'd say she's probably like 10 or 11. To go to boarding school, she'd have to be.
They send kids away to boarding school when they're pretty young. Like, I think I once heard, like, little boys were often sent away at, like, 7.
Oh, jeez. How old do you think Christopher Robin was when he went? Because they said it was about the same age.
See, and that's part of it. Like, I thought he was less than 10.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me see if I can find it out here.
Okay.
Let's look and see. But yeah, she's
say,
not very old.
No, but she's a very competent child.
She is very aware of what's going on.
And what she needs to do, like the thought process of, like, getting to the station and getting the train and...
Well, here gives you a little bit. So, it's the character says that Elsa Solik portrayed a 3-year-old Madison. So the younger girl was 3. So I would say that she would be maybe at least 8. She had to have been a little bit older there. I'm looking to see if this gives us anything, but I don't think any ages are there. Not seeing anything, but yeah, I mean, she's for being a young kid, she is very much aware. I mean, she gets onto her bike and rides directly to the train station, and she gets a ticket, and she gets on the train, and she knows everything. I didn't know anything as a child, and like I said, this kid is very intelligent.
Yeah.
She knows what's going on.
I don't think I was allowed to play at the end of the cul-de-sac without supervision.
I know I wasn't. We had this, like, it was a court. So, like, essentially, like, I'm trying to think. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses in the court. And on the very end was the main road, but that's where my friend lived, on that 5th house on the outside. My mom waited forever before she finally would let me walk the 40 yards down the court to that house without her. So yeah, I know I would not have been able to go to a train station. Man, I think I had to have a cell phone before I could go to the gas station to get, candy by myself. So yeah, and that's another story. But yeah, so she is taking these animals, taking the stuffed animals,
armful.
And yeah, and that's the thing too, is like, there's so much of a disconnect of reality and imagination in this movie, because like Evelyn reacts exactly how you would expect. She freaks out. Her daughter is gone. Like, that's how you would expect someone to react. And then you have like Christopher Robin, who is fine. I mean, just his first reaction to seeing Pooh was, like you said, it was a normal reaction, but very subdued and quickly like, oh yeah, talking stuffed animal. No big deal. So that's one of those things where I was like, I believed the mom, but at the same time I was kind of split between this idea of where's the reality of everything and where's the this is a Disney movie. So I don't know.
I mean, those are also two very different things. It's like his childhood thing that he was very familiar with suddenly came back to life, and then her daughter's missing. Yeah. And her daughter was not happy. And there's definitely a question of, like, why did she run off and where's she running to?
Yes.
And I mean, there's the note, but still.
And, well, and then that's when they get there, and she goes, Evelyn gets to London and can't find, and it's actually, she's only like a step or so behind the whole time.
It shows, like, Madeline running off screen as Evelyn is scanning the station. Yeah. After Madeline has, like, taken all these stuffed animals and gotten tea for them on the trip. Yeah, was it like 5 teas? And she's like, oh, okay. And food and sugar. And quite a bit of honey. Yeah, and then, yeah, you hear Pooh quietly go, and honey. She's like, oh, yes, and honey. So she, Evelyn gets there, and she can't find Madeline, so she goes directly to the Winslow luggage. And she is telling Christopher Robin, like, we can't find him. Where Christopher Robin is desperately trying to take care of this presentation.
Yes, and right as he's giving in, basically, Evelyn saves him, because, in a way, because he opens up his briefcase and starts to take out his papers.
After Giles has, like, put all the pressure on him, after Giles has obviously...
Yes. Giles gets into the elevator. They get into the elevator together, and Giles has his golf bag. And you're like, oh, why do you have a golf bag?
Because earlier in the movie he told Christopher, if it makes you feel any better, I'll be right here working all weekend with you.
Yeah, like we both are going to work on this together. It's going to be very important. Christopher does all the work. He comes there and he notices that Giles has done nothing except for play. He
doesn't say anything about it, but definitely like notices the golf bag, looks confused.
And Giles is uncomfortable that he sees it. He wasn't supposed to see it.
Yeah.
You know. So he gets into the presentation and he sees in his bag are sticks, the weather vane, like Eeyore's tail, yeah. Which again, there's some cool continuity there for your Winnie the Pooh fans.
I think he accidentally removed the tail during the Heffalump fight.
I think so, or something had happened with it. And it's funny because he's the older Winslow is trying to figure out what it is later on. He's like,
is it metal of some sort?
Yeah, he's just like he's holding it up. He has no idea. But they all think that he's lost his marbles. They all think that he's gone crazy because they see all this stuff. They see the fact that he would just have the audacity to leave a presentation like this, and he does it without any question, which is kind of what you would expect. If you can't find your daughter, screw the presentation. That means nothing. He goes and he tries to find his daughter. Well, she's on the way to where he was, and they get into these like luggage crates in order because they see. Well, no, hold on. Before that, they get into a cab, and
she's been telling them, or I think maybe Pooh brought it up to play nap time.
Yes, and because the cab driver is like, where to? And who gives it away? Because someone says something.
Tigger sees his reflection.
That's what it was.
And again, it's a callback to the old movies. He sees his reflection. He's like, there's another Tigger.
Yeah, he's like, there's only one.
He did the song. When he first met Madeline, he did the song, which I loved. And then he sees himself in the reflection. He's like, there's another Tigger. There's only supposed to be one. His eyes are too close together. Yeah. Straight out of the old, like, the very first movies. And the cab driver's like, what's going on back there? Like, he can hear another voice, and Madeline's like, oh, I'm just talking to myself. Yeah. But they're in a traffic jam, and it starts to get out of hand when they start moving again.
Yes, and so there's this idea that the cab driver, he can hear it. He looks back a couple times, and he doesn't quite put it all together. But then he does, and at one point he slams on the brakes.
He freaks out.
And Pooh flies up into like the little partition area and looks over, and he's like, well, hello. And that's when he like loses it. He drives into it like a newsstand. And actually, I'm trying to remember the guy's name.
That part was great.
Oh, they definitely, yeah. So you have a cop and a newspaper seller, like a newsstand guy.
And the cabbie gets out, freaking out. He's like, officer, arrest them. And it's this little girl and her stuffed animals.
Well, and okay, so, and I was right. So the guy, did you notice who the newspaper seller was?
I did not, but I also am very bad with faces and actors.
He played, he was Gareth on the British Office, but he was Ragetti in the Pirates of the Caribbean films, the one with the glass eye that kept falling out. That was him. I was like, wait, he looks really familiar. And I looked and saw, yeah, it's him. So a lot of really famous British actors made their way into this. But the thing is as they're leaving, you see like as Madeline is running away, she's like, no, my father's right there, and you're like, okay,
and I think she says thank you.
Runs off into the crates. That's where they're gonna hide. But as they're running away, all the animals kind of like are like waving or they're moving and talking.
And I think Pooh follows with a very polite thank you very much.
Yeah, and they all just freeze and look at each other like, did you? No, nope.
The captain's like, you saw that. Yes. And the policeman's like, nope, we did not see anything.
Yeah, and they're like, no, they're all shaking their heads like, nope, that didn't just happen. And I thought that was just like a fun, because that's where you start to realize, okay, so the discussion of is this real or not real, it's real.
Yeah, like this isn't just Madeline found his old toys and is playing along.
So there's a lot. I think long term, this movie has a larger impact on the story of Winnie the Pooh than it really, I think it intended, maybe. I don't know. But I think that as far as like the revelation that it isn't just imagination, that is pretty interesting to say the least. So as these people are starting to notice the stuffed animals, she gets into these crates, and
it's on because it's luggage because it's Winslow's luggage.
Oh, that's
going
right.
To
yeah,
Winslow
there's
luggage.
these like large. It's what the old school luggage
steamer
boxes.
trunks or whatever.
Trunks. That's right. And Piglet, Eeyore, and Tigger go into one, and Pooh and Madeline go into another. And of course, as they're looking out, Tigger's tail gets stuck, and he's freaking out because he needs his tail. He can't live without his tail.
He can't bounce without his tail.
And so he's like, all right, everybody jump. It's all right. You know, and they jump.
Bouncing never led to anything bad.
Yeah, of course not.
And then the truck bounces over
It's
a
like,
bump.
Yep. And then they go flying off and into the street, and they're kind of just being sledded along behind.
Because the crate's like tied to something in the truck.
Yeah, there's like some sort of a rope. It's
unexplained, but it's there for plot purposes.
movie logic. Yeah, and so they and the thing is Pooh and Madeline have no idea that they are behind them.
Because
like,
Madeline
being
said
dragged.
lay low.
Yes.
But Tigger can't lay low.
He's like, I don't do that. I bounce. I jump around. So one of the at one point, we're back in the car with Evelyn and Christopher Robin, and she's like, you need to explain. He's like, okay. And he just lays it out. And he says, I am, all of these people, all these animals are back.
Mm-hmm.
They're all of my childhood friends.
I think we flash back like mid-explanation as he's clearly been pouring it all out.
Yes. She's like, again, she brings up the stress and like, you've lost it.
I know a very good doctor. We can get you an appointment. And then suddenly...
And then you get Tigger, Eeyore, and Piglet, who have been launched out of their trunk, have landed on the windshield of their car. And Piglet's like, oh, hi, Christopher Robin. Like,
you must be an Evelyn.
yeah.
or hi, Christopher Robin, who's this? And Chris was, oh, this is Evelyn, my wife. And Eeyore, hello, Evelyn, my wife.
Yeah. Because he even says that later on, too.
I know.
Oh, that was funny. It's just I love the literal. It must have just been fun to write this. As far as how many different times and ways can we take all these characters and look at the actual literal meaning of everything.
Right.
It's just that's got to have been tough to do, but a lot of fun to do.
And like is it more important than a balloon? And then is it more important than Madeline? And he's like, no, Madeline's happiness is everything.
Yeah, and it's those things of it's these creatures, these friends, they are a catalyst for asking yourself the questions that don't need to be asked, or the questions that you are too afraid to ask. The don't need is like the silly things, like
it's how a child does introspection.
Exactly. It's asking all these questions in a lot of situations. They can be very inappropriate. Like, well, you don't ask somebody that. But why not? Like, why don't you ask somebody that? It's ignorance, but not in a bad way. It's just learning.
Yeah.
And so and that kind of that shifts us into back to Pooh and Madeline, who, as they get to the luggage place, they're running. They're like, we're here, and then like out of nowhere, she just biffs it. She falls, and the papers go flying. And she is very, very upset because, again, she thought this was her way to stay home.
Yeah.
And you feel bad for her. At this point, though, I think as an adult audience member, you don't think that this is going to change anything. The papers never mattered. Like, you get, like, as an adult, you're like, the fact that she was going to bring the papers back was not going to sway anything. But her feeling that way is what ultimately keeps her from going.
And also as an adult, again, the weird two-sidedness of this, of like, as an adult, I can see where this is going. I know that Christopher Robin's going to be more relieved at seeing his daughter than he would be at getting the papers. But then I also, as an adult, I'm looking at it like, but the papers were important. They were going to save people's jobs. Because in the boardroom, they can see like the older Winslow is like, well, Giles, didn't you work on this all weekend? And Giles is like, yes. The solution is to fire everyone. Yeah,
he's just going to get rid of the whole
efficiency department.
Yeah.
Which actually, there's a split second where you can see the older Winslow look at him like, huh?
Yeah. He doesn't buy into it, but then it's the only way that they can save money. Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing on the table. So there's this nice family moment where Madeline and Christopher Robin are talking, and she's very upset that she lost the papers. He doesn't care. She's safe. He's found her, and she says, like, if I were to give you your papers, I wouldn't have to leave. And he's like, you don't want to leave, you don't have to. And it's like this idea, like, finally, I guess, hearing it from her, as well as everything he's gone through in the past day or so, kind of helps him to get to this realization that it's important.
And again, he was never like the asshole father.
Exactly.
It was he thought this was what best, and Madeline wanted to please him so much she had always gone along with it. And then this is really the first time she's speaking up, and he's very much ready to listen to her. And I think he would have taken more persuading before. This has definitely like softened him up to the idea of like it's not that important that she go to boarding school, that school. Yeah, and I think it's just the fact that it came from her, because it seemed to have before this always come from Evelyn. Always, right, like because Madeline wasn't going to speak up about it, but Evelyn was trying. Yeah. Well, she does manage to save half of a piece of paper. Yeah. It turns out to be a fairly important half piece of paper, because it gives Christopher Robin this idea, and he sees it, and he's like, "You're wonderful." Because I don't remember what Evelyn says, but she says something that sparks an idea. So he runs back into the boardroom and says, "The answer is." And like they're all up there. Too. Yeah, well, and this is what's cool. So in the time, and this has not been much time at all. This has been maybe an hour. From when Christopher Robin left to when he comes back, the entire efficiency department has been laid off, because they're all of the characters that we've seen in the office have all their belongings, and they're kind of like shuffling out of the office. And the board is now just like going through the stuff they found in Christopher Robin's. Yeah, they're playing with his toys now. They're like, there's a weather vane. What's this tuft of hair on a string? Yeah, and the sticks, and they see it all. And and he runs in, and everybody is following him, all of the people who have been fired, and he says that the answer to their problems is more vacation time. Give more paid vacation time to your employees, and make your luggage cheaper. It's this idea that currently they are only selling a very small amount of luggage to the top. Yeah, they're selling luxury luggage. Yes, to a very small market of people who can afford that. And he's like, flip it. Make cheaper, more affordable luggage for more people, and give them an opportunity to use that luggage by giving them vacation time. And you're going to make more money. People are going to be happier. Your business is going to thrive. And he loves it. The older Winslow, the younger Winslow feels like it's outrageous, but he's quickly put into his place. There's a comment about like he doesn't want to share the beach with all of the lower class. Yeah, and it doesn't, at this point, Christopher Robin says, "Of course you don't like this idea." And he's like, "What's that supposed to mean?" And he stands up to him. He's like, "You've never cared about this business. Like, this is not important to you as it is to all of us." And the dad's like... And he brings up, like, you weren't really working this weekend. Yeah. And the dad's like, "Well, what were you doing?" And Giles is, like, flustered and, like, fiddling with his pocket square, and out flies a golf ball. Yeah. It's like, perfect. I love it's like, why are you holding golf balls in your suit jacket pocket square area? Yeah. But, it got him in trouble, and Dad puts him in his place. Specifically, how are you holding it there and no one can see it? I know, like, a golf ball is going to be sticking out. And you're wearing a tailored suit. But... Movie logic, Xander. Pocket dimensions. In pockets. And this is kind of, I mean, more or less, this is the end of the movie, other than we have another little scene that closes us out. But and then, like, as they're walking out, I think Pooh smiles. Oh yeah, or he looks at him. His head turns. Like, so if you're holding a stuffed animal and you turn it away from you, the head follows, but like the head stays, and he waves to the Giles Jr. He's like, "Did you just see that?" And that's where the dad goes, "Maybe it's you who've lost your marbles." Because justice. And then we jump to a little bit in the future, not like tremendously far. Well, because Robin says, not very far. Because Robin says, "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go on holiday with my family." Yeah, and they decide to go to the 100 Acre Wood, and this is where I was just like, okay. It's so hard. Like, this movie clearly, like we said, it clearly laid out the idea that this is real. But it's just like, I still can't believe it's real. I'm just waiting for, like, this. I was waiting for the mid-credits or post-credits scene to be like, them all dropping acid or something. I just didn't believe. I believed it because it told me I had to. Because that was the plot. But I still didn't believe it. They're all there. No, yeah. They're hanging out. And... As the adult and like, Stargate sci-fi nerd that I am, I was like, okay, wait, this raises so many questions.
Yeah, they all just go to the 100 Acre Wood. Madeline's jumping with Tigger. Everybody's just having a good time, and then Pooh and Christopher Robin go back to their spot. And...
Eeyore is still addressing Evelyn as Evelyn, my wife.
Yes, yeah, and I love that. I think that's one of the nice little subtle things as you're going out of the movie to see. And he has like just a nice moment, and the movie ends subtly, like kind of abruptly. It was like, I mean, there was nothing else to do, but just the way that it ended was like he was there. I think he put his arm around Pooh, and then it went to the storybook sketch, and you're like, oh, okay, that's it.
Oh, I forgot the line. There's the one point earlier because you mentioned it being foggy.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Because there's a line, I think, when they're all gathered around after he saves them from the Heffalump finally, and maybe it's after he wakes up and he's like, oh, the fog is gone, and one of them comments, well, it's always a sunny day when Christopher Robin comes to play. Mm-hmm. And so, like, that's because he didn't come to play, he came for work. Yes. Which is why all the fog was there.
And then when we go later, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Gorgeous
it's exactly what you would expect for a picnic day in the 100 Acre Wood.
Yeah. And then we get a mid-credit scene, which the guy that was singing, I had to look up. I knew he sounded very familiar. It's Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman has done a lot of major songs for Disney. Okay. The Sherman Brothers were actually one of the people who they've made more musical songs for Disney than any, like they wrote pretty much everything. I'm looking at some of the things he wrote. Songs for Mary Poppins, Jungle Book, Winnie the Pooh, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Bedknobs and Broomsticks, Charlotte's Web. Like he also wrote It's a Small World. Like,
oh, okay,
very, very big deal. Mm-hmm. He's very old. He's 90. But he was there singing a song. It's actually
they've got this old piano out on the beach.
Yeah. Movie logic yet again. But yeah, he's singing Busy Doing Nothing, which is a song that he wrote for or what was that? It was not a song he wrote. Hold on here. It was actually a song that was in the soundtrack of A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. Which, yeah.
And it's actually funny because we've gotten this far and I don't think we've said that Poohism or Christopher Robinism yet.
Yes, and that's kind of that's the main reason.
I think it becomes the new slogan for Winslow.
Yeah. And what was it? So, some of the best somethings come from doing nothing. Or doing nothing can often lead to a whole lot of something.
To the very best of something.
There you go. Yeah, my memory's just garbage.
I think you actually went with the one that Winslow, like...
Oh, the evil villain one?
No. I think, because at the end... Robin says, sometimes doing nothing can lead to the very best of some things. And then the older Winslow tries to repeat it.
Yeah.
I think you may have said that one.
All right. So, yeah, I got it. I got there, ish. But yeah. And so that's the whole Busy Doing Nothing. He's singing that because they're all relaxing again and they're all enjoying themselves. And you see all of the workers who we'd seen throughout, and they're wearing their old-timey bathing suits. And two of them say, I think things are about to change. Things are starting to get different, to be different, or something like that. And the camera pans over.
And I think the other one says, and it's very much for the better.
Yes. And that's where we have the camera pans over, and we see all of we have like Tigger, Eeyore, Piglet, Pooh, and they are all sitting there, and they've got like sunglasses on,
and drinks,
and Eeyore says thanks for noticing, and that's it, and they go to the end. So I mean, that kind of is a nice little fun little mid-credit scene. Not necessary, but the fact they got Sherman in there, which I thought was pretty cool, as well as getting to do one little last Eeyore line was pretty neat as well.
And apparently the animals are now vacationing in our world as well, so yeah, so that, I mean, I guess if I'm gonna say that the one thing I didn't like about this movie was that it threw a wrench into everything I had known
quote unquote known about this world, this Winnie the Pooh world, which I before I walked into this, I knew that Christopher Robin's imagination was what he was going to. He's going and playing with his toys, and these are the stories that came from that. Now that's not true anymore. So I'm like, not that I think it ruins anything, but it's just I did not want to do that much thinking going into this movie.
Or Christopher Robin was actually secretly a powerful warlock as a child, and his imagination created this pocket dimension.
That, again, maybe. I don't even know. Because up to this point, I thought it was all fake. So now that we just have walking around stuffed animals, maybe. Because Disney, maybe he was, what's his name, from Fantasia. I don't know. Maybe Christopher Robin is Mickey. That's the real twist. Okay, so what were your final thoughts overall thoughts with the movie? And then each week we do a ranking scale. I was thinking Jars of Honey, but can you think of anything else? Instead of like 1 to 5 stars, we do something else. 1 to 5. Jars of Honey seems very Winnie the Pooh.
If you want to rank it in importance, from a balloon to a briefcase to Madeline's
Jeez. I'm going to feel bad if I don't give it a 5 now.
Little Black Rain Clouds.
Okay. So
wait, is that a negative meter or a positive meter?
Oh, jeez. Let's do Eeyore Tales.
Okay.
So now we're adding Eeyores to the universe, but it's okay. So 1 to 5.
Maybe it's a different pocket universe.
You never know. It could be like Rick and Morty, and there's infinite Winnie the Poohs. So what your final thoughts on the movie, and then your ranking?
I mean, like we said at the beginning, it's a pretty predictable premise. But I think a lot of movies, especially nowadays when they're doing so many remakes and so many reboots, I mean, it's kind of easy to see where a lot of things are going. So that's not a huge detractor, in my opinion. I'm interested in the execution. And it was beautifully executed, in my opinion. It was charming. It was funnier than I expected, heartwarming. And just visually, I mean, part of it's the whatever 50s aesthetic, but to me, just like the CGI and everything, it was beautifully rendered and just a very, very pleasing movie all around. Are we doing decimals?
You can do decimals.
I'm really bad at this.
I say, go ahead and think about your scale. Yeah, I'll give my final thoughts, then I'll give you some time to think of. So, I thought it was very fun. Like I kind of stuck even after. Sometimes like my conversations on some of the movies makes me like something more or less. But I think it's pretty much the same. It's very fun, very cute, very predictable. Again, though, and again, that's not always a bad thing. I wasn't going into this movie expecting something that was going to like throw everything on its head and be very like, oh my gosh, that happened. Whoa, I can't believe that. A couple of the things that I kind of didn't like about the movie, again, I think that whole discussion about how everything was real, it throws a wrench into it all. And I don't know, for the kids that went to see it, they loved it. They didn't care. For people who try to find logic in movies where there's no logic to be found, it upset me a little bit. Not tremendously. The only other thing that I think that I didn't like about the movie was that when I see Winnie the Pooh, I'm always used to seeing like brighter colors. For some reason, I expect to see something. It doesn't need to be like vibrant like Mary Poppins, but at times it almost is. Everything felt like it had like the old filter on it. And I know that's the look. They were going for a vintage look. But a part of me kind of wanted to see a little bit more with that. And I even think that not necessarily the trailer, but if you look at the poster's misleading. The poster has some vivid colors. Like there's the brighter yellow and the brighter reds. And we didn't get that. So I think it was kind of, I wish I would have had a little bit more. I think what they did fit the time period. It fit what they were trying to do, but I think it was a little bit visually less than I was expecting just from the Winnie the Pooh product that I've seen to this point. So
I'll say I hadn't thought about that much, but I do think they could have used the color palette a little bit more to show the contrast of like before and after. That's a good point.
And I mean, I think that how they used it was effective for what they wanted, but I think they could have. They had so much opportunity to utilize it, even if we would have only seen it very vibrant at the very end or at the very beginning and end when he's really invested in this world. I don't know. But we didn't get that. So did you come up with your ranking?
5-point scales always seem very small to me. Cause like if I give it a 4, like that seems high on this scale, but it only equates to like an 80%.
Which is, it's B.
Well, yeah, but like
above average.
I give it at least a B+.
Okay, so like a 4.3. 4.4. All right. She does not want to give it that 90%.
I don't know. What's an A-?
90. Well, it depends on your scale, but most schools you get a 90%.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm giving it a 3.5. A 4. I'll give it a 4 on nostalgia's sake because it was fun. I laughed. I think that they utilized enough of old school classic lines and those ideas that we have come to know and love, but they didn't use too many, so that was weird.
I was gonna say again, like I was a little afraid it would be just a nostalgia trip. Yeah, and it was not.
No, and they had their moments where they kind of they rushed you with it that first morning with Pooh waking up and doing all of his stuff. The Tigger song, the Heffalumps, having those aspects of it. They gave us those aspects, and the Eeyore losing his tail, but they didn't really rush it. We didn't, and also too, part of me giving it a 3.5 out of 5 is that they didn't include Gopher, which I loved Gopher. Gopher was like the grumpy old Clint Eastwood style grandpa, get off my lawn kind of character, and I thought it would have been really funny to see some sort of a CGI'd Gopher, but they didn't go that route. And Kanga and Roo weren't really that involved. They were there, but
that kind of fits though.
But even like Rabbit wasn't that involved, and Rabbit's usually more involved. Owl and Kanga and Roo, those all are kind of secondary. But Rabbit was always for me, and Rabbit wasn't crotchety like he was. Rabbit was too nice.
You got a little bit of it in the beginning. Yeah. Of him like having control of the table and everything. But yeah, he wasn't as much. I wonder if they just didn't want to like animate it.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't go. He wasn't gardening ever. Like Rabbit's always gardening. He had his carrots at one point. Well, again,
they also had people like displaced for most of the movie.
So maybe we'll get a sequel. Yeah. Maybe it'll be Madeline's adventure. I mean, I think it'll ultimately depend on how this one does. Yeah. I think it will do fairly well. It's really, we're kind of getting to the tail end of the summer. There's not a whole lot of competition. So I know that at least for this past week, outside of Mission Impossible getting a lot of attention still, despite my best efforts for telling people not to go see it. I think that Christopher Robin will probably have a good run for the next month or so without a whole lot of competition. So we might get a sequel here.
Especially maybe, last few fun things before school starts for the kids.
Yes, absolutely. Because we got, don't even remind me, I'm going back to school here in a couple weeks. Actually, this coming week this is my last final week of freedom before going back to teach. So, but yeah, so overall, a fun movie. I'm glad I went and saw it. But yeah, it was good. I don't know, because I asked Xander, I was like, Xander, what do you want to go see? Because I was like, I am not married to any of these upcoming movies. And she's like, oh, Christopher Robin looked good. And I was like, all right, sure. I probably would not have seen it in theaters had we not done that. And I'm glad. It was fun. So thank you for that recommendation for us to go see that. Next week, we are going to be talking with a former guest host. It's only his second time on, so we're not repeating too much. But Jonathan Evans, who was on our Avengers podcast, our two-parter, is going to be coming on to talk some movie villains. We're going to be trying a new format here and there, switching it up from looking at reviews only to looking at larger topics. So Jonathan will be in to talk about movie villains and the concept of that, and I'm excited to see where that goes. We'll see. It'll be a little different type of an episode for us, but guys, let us know what you think of it next week, and we'll see. Maybe we'll do it more often. But until then, Xander, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
We'll have you on again here sometime soon. Once things settle down, you're going back to school here soon, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, it's
Last
about to
semester
get
of
busy
masters.
for both of us. So, but yeah, we'll get you back on here again soon. But until then, everybody, thanks for listening and drive home safe.